Messing around with fonts in a design is similar to messing around with chemicals in a science lab. If you don't know what you're doing, the results could be absolutely tragic. Or at least a complete waste of time and resources. So let's get into why fonts matter. My name is Ian Burr and you're watching Design. Alright, why fonts matter. Now I'm going to be laying a bit of a foundation here. I'm going to walk you through a bit of shape psychology and a bit of typography theory. And I just want to say that I'm going to be oversimplifying things for the sake of time, because these kinds of topics can be quite in-depth. They're very vast topics to talk about. So just for the sake of time in this video, I'm going to keep things simple. Let's take a look at something fascinating. Over here we see the letter B repeated 5 times. Now, if you were an alien or if you had no concept of the English alphabet, these might as well be 5 separate pictures to you. However, we know that despite radical differences in its appearance, it is still the letter B. So this tells us that when appearance changes, the meaning stays the same. Remember that. We're coming back to that. And this extends into symbols and numbers and other written characters. So does this mean we can get creative with fonts and typography and we can just use whatever we want because after all the meaning stays the same, doesn't it? No, that's like saying you might as well drive on the pavement because I have the freedom to do so. It's easy to get my car on there and just drive. No, that's quite reckless and dangerous and stupid. We're going to look at how the human eye receives information and how the human brain perceives that information. So I'm going to walk you through a bit of shape psychology. So every object we see kind of boils down or is reduced to its original shape, its origin shape, or as we like to call it, its primitive. And the 3 main primitives are the circle, the triangle, and the square. And obviously there are some shapes that are made up of more than one primitive. Let's take a closer look at the 3 main primitives, starting with the circle. Now the circle has no beginning or end, so it gives us a sense of wholeness and completion. But because there's no straight edges to the circle, there's sort of freedom of movement. Circles can roll and spin, circles can orbit, circles can bounce. We might as well see this as a fruit or a ball or a bubble or a wheel. And here are some real-world examples of the circle in graphic design. There's some circular logos, circular word marks, and circular symbols. Now the reason why these logos and these designs are so friendly and approachable is because they are based on the circle and how our brains perceive that. The square. Now before I continue, I just want to say, when I say square, I'm including rectangles and quadrilaterals to that effect, just to keep things simple here. Squares are seen as stable shapes. They convey a sense of dependability, solidarity, and sometimes honesty. Squares are very rarely found in nature, but as human beings, it is the one shape that we encounter the most on a daily basis. The screen you're looking at, the device, the buttons, the very pixels, the walls, the pictures, the books, the tiles, the roof, the windows, the doors. Squares are everywhere. So let's look at some examples in graphic design and some famous logos and word marks and symbols and icons. Next up, the triangle. Now the triangle is a very fascinating shape and it represents what we call dynamic tension. And what that means is that the triangle is stable on its base, but it's unstable when it's not. So there's a kind of duality to the triangle. Triangles also give a sense of warning because in nature, when we see triangles, we associate them with spikes or sharp teeth or thorns. Triangles can also be used as arrows. They can direct movement depending on which way they are pointing. So let's look at some examples here. Now, what does shape psychology have to do with fonts? Well, let's take a look at this text. This font is called Ultra, and it's a beautiful font. You can get it for free from Google Fonts. It's a fantastic, loving, friendly, big daddy kind of font. So let's take a closer look as to why it's so big and friendly. Now immediately we can recognize the primitives in these letters. They are big stable squares, sort of grounding and keeping the font stable here. But also there are these huge, big, gentle curves, these beautiful curves that give the font a sort of friendliness and approachability. And it's quite fascinating because the human brain actually picks these up. Whenever we read a font, or whenever we read some text somewhere, the human brain picks these little shapes up. And that's why shape psychology is important to why fonts matter. So because of shape psychology, we perceive different meanings from fonts because of their appearance. So remember when we looked at all those B's earlier on? Not those ones. The letter B. Yes, those ones. Now remember I said when the appearance changes, the meaning stays the same. Okay, that is still true. However, we can take advantage of the intended meaning by changing the appearance of the font. Let's look at the 4 basic types of fonts. We have serif, sans serif, script fonts, and display fonts. Now, before I continue, I once again want to just say that I'm simplifying things here. To classify fonts into their proper categories is quite a technical process. There's a more technical way of categorizing fonts, but for the sake of time and simplicity, we're just going to keep it basic. So let's look at the serif. Serif fonts are recognizable by the barbs and the feet. They also have thick and thin sections to them. And these are elegant, classical, and sophisticated fonts that you would use for more formal designs. Then we have sans serif, and sans means without serif. There are no serifs on these fonts. And these are geometric, modern, and simple fonts that you would use for more informal designs. Then we have script fonts, which are based on handwriting, calligraphy, and organically written things. And you would use script fonts for titles and headings. And then we have display fonts, which are decorative, fun, playful, sometimes ornamental fonts that you would also use for titles and headings. Now, like I've been saying in all my videos, selecting fonts for a design is like selecting clothes for an occasion. You're not going to go to a funeral and rock up in pajamas, or you're not going to hire a tuxedo to go surfing. You're gonna match your clothes to the occasion, and it's the exact same thing with fonts. Caution. Now, you'd see this sign somewhere in like a factory or something like that. It's very clear, it's very readable. However, if we change the font, although that's very pretty, it's a very pretty script font, it kind of loses the meaning. In fact, it almost kind of mocks the meaning. It's almost irreverent and irresponsible because, you know, this caution sign might be warning someone of an actual danger, and you're kind of like mocking the process. You're kind of taking away from that seriousness. And this is why fonts are important. This is why you have to put thought into what fonts you choose for your design. So you have to know your audience, you have to know your message, and select your fonts accordingly. Choose fonts that will resonate with your audience. Choose fonts that enhance your message. This basically comes down to biology. The way the human eye receives information and perceives things comes down to the way we are hardwired. You want to be able to choose fonts that resonate and build a stronger connection to your audience, which at the end of the day enhances how your brand is seen and perceived. And this is why fonts matter. Let me know in the comments below what you thought. My name is Ian Burr, and you're watching Design.